There we go.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, cool. We're recording now. So a quick run through again. Audio is a waveform, right? Like think of recording vocals, recording guitar, and a MIDI track is actually making MIDI notes based on like whatever third party VST you have or like synth, right? And then you can change those MIDI notes. And then with the MIDI again, uh, this little button right here is super helpful. The headphone button, meaning when you move these up and down, you can hear the note that you are actually moving it to. And then this yellow button is on and off. The S button is solo or don't solo. And then the button next to that is record. So now let's go into this button right here. This is your panning section. So right now you hear that the sound is in the center, right? And now what this can do is you can move it left and right. So as I move it left, you'll hear the sound go to the left. You guys hear that? And then to the right. All right. Cool. And then these two buttons are sends and returns, but we won't go over that right now. We'll go over it in another lesson. So now let's get on to what we have over here. So you'll see all these categories that you have: sounds, drums, instruments, audio effects, MIDI effects, blah blah blah. And we'll kind of just pick those out one by one. Well, actually, before we do that, I'll tell you what all these top things do. So this link button, you guys won't need to know this now. If you guys ever decide to get into, recording with actual like analog synths, then we can talk about link. But basically, what that does is if you have like a physical synthesizer, and it allows you to kind of link the tempo, right? So if you have like a synth arpeggio playing eighth notes without link, it will be hard to like match the BPM of that to your Ableton BPM. But if it's linked and you're at 140 BPM, the synth will automatically be playing eighth notes at 140 BPM. External, we don't need to talk about right now. These two are all in relation to BPM. So if you want to tap your BPM like 1, 2, 3, 4, it'll figure out the BPM based on your taps. I usually don't use that. I usually just double click into it, or you can just click it and change it to 160 BPM or 75 BPM, whatever you want. Okay. You don't have to worry about these buttons either. They basically just nudge the BPM up and down. But I mean, I usually don't use that at all. I usually just type in the BPM and it's a lot easier. And then next we have time signature. So how many beats are in a bar? You guys probably know that. If it's 4x4, 4/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. If you want to do 3, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. And then this one is your metronome. So if you want to hear a steady quarter note while you're creating something, you can hear the metronome, right? So that's doing quarter notes at 75. Let's go up to 135. 2, 2, 3, 4. So if you have it soloed with that, you can hear the metronome over the sample. All right, let's nudge it a little bit. Dope. And if you want to do this right click, it has, you can change the sound of it. Right now it's classic. You can change it to like wood, whatever's more pleasant to your ear. Also count in, that refers to how many counts you have once you press record to when it actually starts recording. So this will be super helpful when you're recording like vocals or guitar. If you want like, say I want 2 bars before 2 bars that starts when the second I click this record button to when it actually starts recording, right? So I'll click record and then I'll have 2 bars before it actually starts and then go, right? You can change that to 1 bar or 4 bars. That's good because it just gives you time from your hand clicking on the button to you getting, set up to play guitar or getting set up to like start singing. Do you guys have any questions about that stuff right now? Also, if I'm going too fast, please let me know and I can slow things down.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, we're good.
Okay, cool. Now let's move on to this section right here. I'll just go over the basic things that you need to know. This button is kind of like, it kind of moves your arrangement view, right? So if I have this playing and I'm kind of trying to just scan the whole session out, I can click that and you'll see like once I get to here, it'll actually move the screen with that, right? Whereas if it's off, it'll just stay there, right? And now we have your standard play, we have your stop button, you have the record button. And then we will go into all of these other things during the next lesson. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure all this stuff is pretty plain and simple. This button right here is your drawing button. So that refers to automation. So think about automation as like whatever kind of audio effect or whatever type of processing you have on something, even think of it as volume. It's automating from 0 to 100, right? So say we have this negative 12 dB as the volume. This is basically the automation of it, right? So you'll have like a line saying, I want to go from, negative infinity to, like negative 12 dB, like that. You can draw these lines. So you'll hear it go, right? So you can either do straight lines or you can use this drawing thing and, kind of like draw it to how you want, if that makes sense. So we have that. And so that's just with volume, but this will kind of be your basis for automating whatever the fuck you want, right? So say we still have this sample and we go into audio effects. And pretty much what audio effects are is they affect the audio in various ways. So think of things like reverb, like delay, stuff like that affects the audio. So we can go into audio effects to start with something simple like a reverb. You guys both know what reverb is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So basically just making it sense like you're singing in a room or a hall or a cave or something, right? So we have reverb and we can kind of automate this this dry wet if we want the same way. So basically what will happen is if you click on a knob, you can right click and say show automation and it will show the automation on the track exactly like how we showed volume. So now we can do the dry wet and go from 0 to 100. And basically what dry wet is dry is 0%, and that means none of the signal is going through the reverb, right? And if you get it to 100%, which they call wet, that means that 100% of the signal is going through the reverb. So you'll hear the reverb slowly start to come in, or actually quickly come in over the course of this bar because we went from 0 to 100, right? So let's hear it. Right? And we'll go back down. You guys get that?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So we have that. And I'll go into the different audio effects later. Like during our upcoming lessons, we'll probably go through like 4 or 5 audio effects at a time, and we'll really like go into what each of these different things do and how you can, make the reverb sound like you're in a small room, or make the reverb sound like, you're in a concert hall, or make it sound like, you're out in the desert or something. I mean, not the desert. You won't really get reverb out there, but you guys know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So now that we have all that stuff down, oh yeah, sorry, I need to go over this button too. So this is your piano button. So when it's turned off and say I'm record enabled on Serum, right? You won't get a sound. So in order for you to be able to play your keyboard, your actual like laptop keyboard with Serum, like a keyboard, you just click the keyboard icon, and now go turn it on, right? So that's to be able to use MIDI. Um, and then if we click on here, if we drag this out, you can also just see the notes, right? So we have that. Now let's go into what all these categories are. So first, we have sounds. So think of these as things that you like, just like pieces of audio, right? It's not like Serum to where you can create different synth patches and then use MIDI. The sound is just a sound. So let's go into something like brass, for example. So Ableton already comes with a lot of you know in-house sounds and instruments and audio effects. So these are some of the sounds that you'll get. You can just kind of go through all of them, right? So let's see what happens if we put these sounds in an audio clip versus a MIDI clip. So if we put the sound in an audio clip into an audio track, only audio effects in. Oh, sorry. These are just sounds that you'll put into a MIDI effect, a MIDI clip, I believe. Sorry, I don't usually use these sounds. 1 second. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's what I thought. So this actually isn't a sound. My bad. Think of them as like synthesizer presets, right? So you can drag these into MIDI clips, and then it will have that as a synth, right? Or we have this. We can drag it into a MIDI clip. And now it's used as a MIDI. And the cool thing about these two is this is all called sound design and synthesis. We won't get on to actually creating sounds until a couple lessons after. But the cool thing about going into these presets is you can kind of look at what they have made and what they're doing. And if you want to change like slight things to make it your own, like you could experiment like right now and just move a couple knobs and see how that affects the sound. So you can just have fun with that for fucking hours and do whatever the hell you want with that. They also have like things like pianos. Right, they have strings, stuff like that. So yeah, you can definitely just go in and just kind of experiment with whatever sounds they have. So that's nice too, is because you don't need a lot of people think I immediately need to buy like a bunch of different like VST plugins, and by that I mean like Serum, like Omnisphere, like different things. But you really do have a lot right out of the box with Ableton, which is really nice. So you have sounds, you have a lot of drums, right? And the cool thing about these drums is they're separated into drum hits and drum racks. So drum hits are individual things, right? So you have like your kicks, like that, different kicks. You also have different claps, right? And et cetera, et cetera. But if you go into these, you have a full kit at your disposal. So let's see what the detail kit is. It gives you a sample of all the different sounds that come in that drum kit. So if we pull this up into a MIDI track, of course, you will see that now you have a full drum kit. And what's cool about these is when you're first starting to arrange drums, it's sometimes a little hard for you to, kind of hear which kick goes good with which snare goes good with which hi-hats go good with each cymbal. So all of these kits, they're all going to sound cohesive and together because they were made by the people at Ableton that know what different sound kits sound like. So we have this detail kit, and if it's record enabled, then we can just go on our laptop keyboard and right? We have all these sounds that already sound good together. So pretty much, let's say, let's do an example, and we will loop 4 bars. And how we loop 4 bars is, you guys see this little thing up here?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of your loop. So right now it's over 4 bars. You can go to the end of it and left click, hold it down, and you can drag it to whatever you want. That's one way of moving your loop. Another way of moving your loop is, say, like, I want bars 6 and 7 looped. So you'll left click, you'll highlight, and then you can press Command L, and that will automatically loop it. Just like that. So let's go, let's just record just a blank space, right? So now we can go in here, click in that, and we can see where all the notes are. And let's turn on the metronome. And now we can pretty much just have this looping, and we can just click things in, right? So we're just clicking in stuff right now. And then these notes are velocity. So think of it as, if I'm hitting a snare drum, 0 velocity is I'm hitting it super lightly, right? And full velocity means I'm fucking slamming it, okay? So if we change this velocity right here, it slowly gets a little louder, but all the way to 0. You can't even hear it because it's being played so lightly. And you can change the velocity of all these at the same time by just left clicking and highlighting everything, and then just moving one all the way up, right? So now we have our kick. We can just have like a snare. And if you want to just see how they sound without even like putting anything down, you can just click on the actual piano, right? So let's have a snare, and we'll just hit that on like the 2 and 4s. Wait, oops, did that wrong. Like that. Wait, am I stupid? Oh, yeah, I'm stupid. Right, so now we have that, and then we can add like some hi-hats. All right, some hi-hats. Let's go with something like that. And by the way, how I'm duplicating this is, if I click on that, I can press Command D, and it just duplicates the note. So I can just like hold that down, and it will put hi-hats like just like that. So now we have our 2-bar loop. Oh fuck, that's way too that's way too hectic. Let's make that in half. Cool. And let's say I want to turn the hi-hats down a little bit. I can move their velocities down a little bit by doing this. So now it's just more in the background because the velocity isn't that, it isn't as big as the other ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have that. And that's kind of like how you can, build different like drum arrangements by just looping. You'll just have like 2 bars, then you can just like loop until you have something you like, right? And then we can add like different like things, right? Let's add this. I think this will sound good. And so, yeah, that's kind of the beauty of these like built-in drum things too, is that whatever you decide to put together, like those sounds will sound cohesive because they're out of the same drum kit. Whereas instead of like, if you have like a blank drum kit, whereas like all of these are blank, and you're like, okay, I want a snare and then I'm trying to get like a rim. You don't know if those will sound good together, right? So I definitely say start with picking out from these like specific drum kits and playing with those before moving into creating your own.
Mhm.
Do we have any questions about the drum kits or drum arrangement? I mean, we'll go into actually arranging drums later, but like just how to do it.
Um, Honestly, how do you pull up the thing where you're seeing all the stats?
Oh, right here. Yeah. So if I click out of it, nothing will be there. What you have to do is if you click the individual track, it'll show you the sounds, right? And you're messing with the sounds. But if you want to mess with the MIDI, which is placing the notes, you click on the actual MIDI right there, right? On that bar. And then that's how you pull up the sounds, like the arrangement of it versus actually altering the sounds. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So now let's go into instruments, and we have all these different things. These are basically all different synthesizers. So we can throw in another MIDI track, record enable that. Let's go through analog. Let's see the basses they have, and it's the same thing as if you click on it. Make sure your headphone icon right here is blue, and then you can hear what each of them sound like before picking it. I like that one, so let's click that. Right. So now we have this. This is my default rack. It won't be there. So this is what it will look like. So now you have, right. And then you might not know what all of these different things do, and we'll go over what they do later. But right now, like I feel like your main purpose should just to be, just getting familiar with the overall layout of Ableton, and then just like kind of critical thinking, like, okay, let's hear what this knob does if I turn it up and down. Right. So they each do different things. We'll go over that later, but yeah, just kind of play around and see what things do. So it's like, let's just like fuck around and do some bass things. Ooh, that sounded a little shitty, didn't it? So we can just click things. Let's just make some things real quick. Something like that. And boom. Something like that. So now we have our bass, right? And then we can maybe make this cutoff like go like open up over time. So we can right click that knob, press show automation, and now we have this to kind of just fuck around with. So maybe I can make it go from like low to high. Let's delete this. Let's delete that. So now we have, you hear how it's kind of opening up over time. So it's soloed right now. So with the kit, right, so we have that. And so, yeah, you can just go through these different things like basses, strings, and then they have different things. This is all based on their analog synthesizer, but they have things like collision and different drum racks as well, and operator, and they're pretty much just all different synthesizers that have different presets, and you can make different sounds on them. They just have slightly different layouts. So we can go into each of them more extensively later on. But like I said, I just want to give you a general overview.
Mm-hmm.
So Any questions about instruments before we move on?
Another general question. So
Yeah.
you're looping this like small amount just to like figure it out, but then when you're actually doing it in the track, would you like duplicate it over and over or like drag it out to make it like play through that the whole, does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. So, I usually like to start working in loops and, cram as many ideas into like 2 or 4 bars as possible. And then, I mean, and this is me personally, but you can arrange in a different way. But the reason I like it is because, say I've like had 2 bars and made this, right? So now what I can do is I can copy it, and then you can just right click copy, and then let's start it right here. Right click paste, and then right click duplicate, right? Um, but the cool thing about that is like once you already have these, then it's already, you already have like the full arrangement, right?
Mhm.
So what I can do is like say at the beginning I want to take out the kick. I'll delete the kick. Um, and I'll take out the shaker. And then number 2, maybe I'll only take out the kick. And number 3 has everything. So now it's kind of like starting stripped and slowly gets more intensive. So if we sound it off, right? So it's just like it's a really quick way for you to be able to take an idea and make a full song out of it, because you're not thinking of, like, oh man, I need to add more elements, because you made that 2 bar loop. You have all these elements and when they're all together that they all work together. So whatever you strip away, whatever's left will still sound, cohesive. And it's just very easy, in my opinion, to develop ideas into full tracks. Um, so that's kind of why I do it. I do that a lot, especially even with like my EDM stuff. Like I'll have a 4 bar loop and I'll have like a bass line and I'll have literally 5 different synth lines with different melodies. But like they can all go over that synth line, and then I'll have like a shit ton of drums. So when I'm creating, 4 bars into 200 bars, like I can be like, okay, this synth melody goes at the beginning. This one goes at the drop. This one goes at the second, like, verse. But they all sound cohesive because they all like work together, even though it might sound like shit because so much is going on at that specific point. That like it's not going to sound like they sound like 2 different songs.
Right. That makes sense.
Cool. So now let's go into audio effects. Any other questions right now?
Yeah, no? We're good.
And am I going too fast? Or are you guys okay?
I think we're good. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I feel like I need it fast, right? Like my mind wanders.
Yeah, I feel that. Okay. Let me know if I need to go faster, and I can too. Um,
Perfect.
dope. So now we'll get into audio effects, and basically I know it sounds like audio effects to some people think, oh, you can only put it on audio tracks, but you can put it on MIDI tracks too, because the MIDI notes are creating audio, right? So let's say I have this detai kit. Let's the first thing I always suggest for all my students to do, and how I was taught to do it from my professors and everything, is it's very easy to get overwhelmed by all of these different audio effects and just be like, I don't know what the fuck anything does, like holy shit. And that's totally fine. And so especially your first year while doing this, you should just be, drag and drop and see what the fuck happens. It's all about, training your ear to be like, okay, if I put delay on this, and of course the dry wet is uniform with every single audio effect, right? So dry means none of the sound is going through this delay. Wet means 100 of it is going through this delay. So the whole signal is going through the delay. So again, dry. And now let's hear it with the delay. Right? So pretty much what delay does is it takes that signal and it delays it to a certain extent, right? So think of these notes as eighth notes. So it pushes the whole signal back by 3/8 notes. It's hard to hear it when it's 100% wet, but let's put it at 0% wet, and we'll slowly start to fade it in and see if you can hear it in the background. You hear that? And then what?
Like the delay in the background?
Yeah, in the background, yeah. And what you can do, what this is an EQ for your delay. Do you guys know what EQ is? It's all good if you don't.
No.
So pretty much think of EQ as low versus high frequencies. So our ears, they can hear from all the way as low as 20 hertz up to 20,000 hertz. I mean, there are sounds that are higher and lower than that, but the human ear can't hear that. So pretty much that's what we're dealing with. Think of the lows, like 20 hertz to like say like 150 hertz. That's the sound of the sub bass, where you can almost not hear it, but it's more of a feeling, and then your low mids are around 150 hertz to 500 hertz. Think of that as your low basses that have that girth, especially in like bass music. That's predominantly the lead bass is resonating in the low mids, and you have your mids, which is around 500 hertz to 2000 hertz. By the way, don't worry if you don't remember the exact numbers. We'll go over it again later. And that's pretty much, where your vocal resides. Of course, male vocals, for the most part, will have slightly lower frequencies in terms of like what it's best at, while as female vocalists or anyone who has like a soprano voice and stuff like that, they will be more registering in the highs. And then after that, like 5,000 hertz to 20,000 is all pretty much just shimmer. So let's put this dry wet at 100, so we're only hearing the delay, and we'll slowly start to scan this filter and see how the delay changes based on where we put this EQ, right? So right now we're pretty much only hearing the kick, right? But if we go up, we're only hearing the mids now. If we go all the way up, we're pretty much only hearing the cymbals and the hi-hats, right? Because those are the high frequencies. So say like, I just want the delay to be the high frequencies because I don't want my kick and snare to get muddy. So now, let's slow this down. I'll freeze this real quick. So now when we slowly bring this in and we bring the delay in, you'll only hear the delay in the high end, but the kick and the snare won't be delayed, right? You hear how only the hi-hat's being delayed versus, are you guys getting a little like rumble, or is the signal coming clean?
It's coming clean, yeah.
Okay, cool. As long as it's only on my end, then we're good. So yeah, that's pretty much what EQ is. And then these left and right, when you're delaying, it sends a signal to the left and a signal to the right. So this means that it's linked, that they'll both be coming in at 3/8 notes. But if you click unlink, then you can have the left side coming in at 3/8 notes. You can have the right side coming at like 5, right? And then if let's hear 3 and 3. It sounds the same on both. But if we have it like 3 and 5, hear how the left and right are slightly different. Cool. And so you can just experiment with that. Also, these buttons sync means it's synced to the tempo. If you click it, it'll become time, and you can change it to milliseconds. And it's really subtle. The thing I like to that's really fun for me to do with this millisecond thing is if I show this automation and I like automate the milliseconds, it actually like sounds super trippy. Right. So that's like some like really cool stuff you could do. So yeah, that's all we'll run through in terms of delay right now. Went pretty extensively into that one, but it's really good on vocals or on guitar. So you know how like you hear like singers doing like blah 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 blah, you know, like slowly in the background. It helps really fill out the vocals. And we'll go more into vocal processing and how to, you know, put that shimmer or those extra little audio effects to make it sound full. We'll go over that soon. So yeah, that's delay. But pretty much what I was trying to get at is really just experimenting with these things. Like say like, hey, I don't know what flanger does, right? So just click on flanger. Um, you have the dry and wet knob on everything. So first hear it by itself without it, and then see what it does when I slowly start putting it in. And literally just like play with knobs and like hear how it changes the sound. So yeah, if you want to just smoke a fucking bowl and just like, you know, just fuck around. That's usually how I do it.
Okay.
So yeah, we have flanger. And one more thing we'll go over is audio effect racks. These are really cool because what that makes you do is you can have an audio effect rack and you can make a chain of audio effects. And a lot of people are like, okay, so a lot of people are like, I don't know like what to put in my chain because I don't know what effects sound good together. It doesn't matter. It's a lot of this is about experimenting. So just put like 3 different audio effects in there at once and just see what it does, right? So let's just say I'll put a flanger in there, and I'll put an auto pan in there, and I will put a, let's go with an overdrive. And an overdrive is pretty much just like distortion. Think of like metal guitars and stuff like that. Um, where's that overdrive? Right here. And so the cool thing about these audio effect racks is they have what are called macros. And these macros can be assigned to any single knob in here, right? And it can be assigned to multiple knobs. So say, Delaney, you didn't see, I pretty much just opened an empty audio effect rack, which is right here. And then I dragged 3 different effects into the drop audio effects here section, right? So now we're at here. And now I'm explaining macros, which is like a knob that can control a variety of knobs. So let's say I want to control the dry wet of every single thing within these 3, right? So I will right click, edit, or you can actually do it this way. Say I want to control the dry wet, you can map it to macro 1. So now this dry wet will affect the dry wet of there, right? But I can also do it with AutoPen, they call it amount. I can also map it to dry wet. So now it's at 100 versus 0. It's controlling both of the audio effects. And I can do it to overdrive too. So now, based on these 3 effects, I can alter the dry wet of all 3 of these things cohesively instead of like, you know, each individually. And so now let's just see what that sounds, right? What that sounds like. Right? So we have the flanger doing this. Oh wait, the overdrive's still on. We have the flanger doing this by itself. We have the auto pan doing this. And we have the overdrive doing this, which is pretty much like a distortion. But since I have this macro mapped to everything, you know, we can just change, we can see what all 3 of these things sound like together, which is the point. So this is all about experimenting too, is literally just take things and map different knobs to different macros and just get weird with it and see what happens, because it's kind of like a common thing called happy little accidents, where you might not know like what the end goal is, and it's just experimenting. But if you're experimenting, you'll come across some different things that you would have never thought to do just because you're experimenting, and it sounds actually super cool. So that's not cheating or anything. That's literally just experimenting. And sometimes you're going to get lucky and find something super sick. So definitely don't be afraid to do that. Any questions about audio effects or audio effect racks?
Oh, actually, I have a question. So when you're like playing around with it and you make it like super distorted, how do you like default it back to how it was? You just turn it all off.
Yeah. So if you can, so this dry wet is now connected to all those macros you see. But if you want to change the overdrive originally, I would put it at a separate macro so it's not connected to this, because now if I move this, it's controlling that dry wet, that amount, and that dry wet. So if you want to change them independently, I just wouldn't put them on the same macro. But you see how like with this macro, if I do show automation, you can actually change the automation right here like that, and it will do what you tell it to. Right? Just like that. Was that the answer to your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Next, we will go on to MIDI effects. So audio effects affect the audio, MIDI effects affect the MIDI. So let's go into that bass. Don't worry about what I'm doing. Freeze, unfreeze. It just saves me CPU. So let's go into here. So that's a MIDI track. Let's see what it has. So we can change things like arpeggiator, chord, MIDI effect rack, stuff like that. So a cool thing about, do you guys know what an arpeggiator is?
I don't think so.
So pretty much what that does is if you have one note, it'll arpeggiate it, meaning think of this as an arpeggio. It's basically just a group of notes played consecutively that repeat, right? So this right here, this is an arpeggio if we do this. Right? It just changes. This is like another arpeggio that just changes over time, right? That's basically what an arpeggio is. So arpeggiator basically does that for you, so you don't have to draw on all the notes. Basically, you just draw on one. You just draw on the notes that you want. Say I want this note, this note. This note. We'll just like legato them. The legato button means like if it's short, it will basically push it to the end of the phrase, right? So if I just want to make everything long, I'll make another one. So now we have these three notes, right? So now, if I click arpeggiator and I put that into the MIDI track, now it has these three notes in its information. And so what it will do is it will arpeggiate those notes based on what different types of rates and distance that you do. So without doing nothing, literally just clicking arpeggiator, let's see what happens. So without it, like nothing, except for one note because it's monophonic. Monophonic means it can only play one note at a time. So if you put like three notes in there at the same time, it will only play one of the notes because it can only play one voice at a time. Some are polyphonic, which means you can play, multiple notes at the same time, make chords, pads, but some, especially like basses, they'll usually be monophonic. And so how we make that arpeggiate is through an arpeggiator. So now we can see that's in eighth notes, right? But say if I want to do it in 16th notes, right? Or say distance, 12 steps, let's bring it up to 24. So that will basically change the octaves or change the range that it can do. So you guys know what an octave is?
Yeah.
So like C to C, right? So basically what steps and distance do is it changes your range. So even though I only have this C, G, and E flat in one octave, bumping the steps and distance up will place the C, G, and E flat in like 2 octaves or 3 octaves, if that makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then style, right now you can hear it's clearly going up, right? But if we want to go down, right? Or you basically you can literally just use even randoms. So you can just mess around with that and and that's a great way, like say you're having a hard time coming up with a like a synth melody. This is a great way of, you know, finding something that works. So you can basically just have this running for say like 8 bars. And just be like, I don't know what type of melody I'm going to create, but let's just run the arpeggiator and let's do like, let's literally do random. And what we can also do is right now this is MIDI, but we can have an audio track. I just right clicked and then insert an audio track. And what I'm basically about to do is whatever audio is being created by this arpeggiator, because MIDI tracks create audio, right? We are going to route that to this audio track. So we're going to actually create a waveform based on what's being played by this MIDI. So this might get a little tricky. Just tell me if you have any questions, but these are sends and returns. So pretty much what I'm going to do is right now it's being sent to the master, but I'm going to send it to this audio track. So I'm going to click that, send it to audio. So if it's soloed, you're not going to hear it, right? Because the audio isn't being sent to the master anymore. It's being sent to this audio. So pretty much, look what happens. If I record this, you guys see how audio is being made? That's the audio that's coming from here.
Okay.
So, and you still don't hear anything. So how you can hear it is you can click this, just click auto, and you'll be able to hear it. Pretty much that means like if it's off, whatever's being sent to this audio track, you won't be able to hear. But if you click auto, then whatever's being sent, you'll still be able to hear it. So right now, like, let's go back to this MIDI thing. I don't know what my melody is going to be. I don't know what my arpeggio is going to be, but I made the style random and we're just going to play it for 8 bars and see what pops up in audio, right? So 1 bar. We can even like go in and change this too. Right, so now we have, we can literally just delete this, or we'll just turn it off or freeze it. And now, and I'll explain to you what freezing is real quick. So if I right click and I press freeze or unfreeze track, what freezing does is it freezes all of these audio effects, because each audio effect you have, each track you have running creates more CPU. And the more you have, it'll be harder and harder for your laptop or computer to, you know, kind of process, because there's a lot of shit going on. So in order for you to save some CPU, you can freeze tracks that you're not currently working on. And see how I just freeze that? I won't be able to, you know, go into the different macros and stuff and change it because it's frozen. But on the positive side, it'll save me CPU. And if you ever want to go back in and change stuff, you can just click unfreeze and you'll be able to change those buttons again. But right now I'm going to freeze that and we'll go into, let's listen to this audio that we made. Right? So now I have like I didn't even make these notes, but like I can listen. So like say I like those bars. Now that's my arpeggio. And you just duplicate that. So now you have this arpeggio. Right? So it's super easy, and then once you have your arpeggio, like you can just put in whatever audio effects you want and just start going to town. So say I have like a reverb, whatever. So now with the drums, and then just start messing around. So arpeggiator is really cool. That's just one of the MIDI effects you have. And these are pretty, it's pretty intuitive. Like chord makes a chord out of one note, right? MIDI effect track is like audio effect tracks, but with MIDI effects. Note length changes. You can alter the length of your note. I usually don't use that. I usually just go into the actual MIDI and I just like change the length how I want, because I don't usually randomize my length. Pitch will change the pitch, make pitches like higher or lower depending on whatever. So yeah, that's pretty much what MIDI effects are. They're audio effects. Audio effects to audio is MIDI effects to MIDI. Do we have any questions on that?
No. Mm-hmm.
Cool. And we will wrap up with Max for Live. Don't worry about that yet. That's basically like coding, but musically. Don't worry about that yet. And then plugins are, say if you want to buy like Alicia's Keys, which is a really cool like piano VST, or I want to buy Serum, which is a really cool like synthesizer. When you download these plugins, they will go into your plugin folder. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But there are basically two kinds: VSTs and audio units. VSTs, think of like MIDI, like third-party MIDI plugins, and audio units, think of like third-party audio effects, if that makes sense. So like how in audio effects we have reverbs, but in my plugins, if we go into the audio units, you can see I have different reverbs built from different companies, right? And they all do slightly different things. See, like this one right here is a vintage verb, so it's a reverb, but it sounds like vintage, stuff like that. Those will all go in there, and we can talk about how to download and import plugins at a later thing. And then these samples are just like pretty much just a shit ton of samples for you to go through. One more thing I'll leave you guys off on is, say if we have a sample, this, or like, sorry, is that fucking your guys' ears up? My bad. So say we have that. We can put this into either audio or MIDI. If we put it into audio, that's all it will be. Right? We can click on it. We can transpose up here. Right? Or we can take a MIDI track, and let's see what happens if we put this in MIDI. Right. If we put it onto the MIDI channel like this, shit. So when you see that, do you see this convert audio to right here?
Yeah.
So let's just click melody. Oh, fuck. You just double click on it. And basically it's right here, but it's a MIDI effect, or it's a MIDI channel. So you can actually just change the transposition by playing on the keyboard. Right. So yeah, I'll just do one more quick overview because that's about all the time we have. And if you guys have any last questions, then I can get to them. But basically running it down, you have audio tracks and MIDI tracks. Audio tracks are actual waveforms. MIDI tracks have MIDI note data, right? And you'll see actual waveforms in the audio. MIDI, you can actually go into and change this button up here, the headphone button, allows you to hear the note as you're changing it. Then we have different sounds that are synths. We have different drums. The drum racks are really cool because they have cohesive sounds together. That's why I like looping and 2 bars or 4 bars, because it's very easy to create arrangements out of it by literally just deleting instruments during different sections. Then we have instruments, which are also kind of like sounds, that are also synthesizers. We have audio effects, and those are things like reverb, echo, delay, flanger, and they change things in different ways. And you can make audio effect racks where you can combine multiple audio effects and have different macros, connected via one knob. And then we have MIDI effects for MIDI tracks, which are like audio effects for audio tracks. We have different plugins that you can purchase. Some are for free, and we can go into later how to import them from websites and get them into your own DAW. And then we have a bunch of samples. Do you guys have any other questions, or any questions at all about what we went over today?
I have one question that I'm not sure if you answered, but when you converted the MIDI track into the audio track, what was like the point of doing that? Like, can you not leave it as a MIDI track for the master?
So here's the problem with that: is if I have this this brass stab. Here, one sec. Right, if I have this, I just put these notes down. Let's go. Right, so if I have this and I have the arpeggiator on, which is through MIDI effects, arpeggiator, and especially if it's in random. So if I have it like here, let's just delete this shit real quick. So if you heard it, like every time it loops, it's going to be different. So say if I play it once and I'm like, oh shit, I liked that section right here. Well, the next time it comes to that section, the arpeggiator is still on random, so it's going to be a completely different set. So that's why if I'm using arpeggiator and I'm trying to experiment for different melodies, I'll drag it out to 16 bars and I'll record those 16 bars. So if I have a section that I like, the audio is not going to change because that's what it was, Whereas if it were still on MIDI, then it would still be randomizing if we went back to it. Does that make sense?
Okay, makes sense. So only when you're like randomizing it basically and you want to keep track of what it did.
Exactly. Yeah.
Makes sense.
But like, say like if I'm trying to experiment with different audio effects, like a reverb and flanger and stuff, and I have my automation point set up, like stuff like this, show automation, I have that set up, then of course I can keep that the same because the automation's not randomizing. It's going to be set to whatever you put it at. And then you can just like change it based on its loop to hear like what you exactly want from it. Does that make sense?
Okay, that makes sense.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, dope. So now, how do you guys think I did? If there's any ways I can improve from lessons going forward, do you guys have any comments?
No, I feel like you went through it well. Yeah, I was like really intimidated.
Really what? Hold on one second. Hello? Delete. Wait, I can't see you guys anymore. Are you guys talking? What the hell? Okay. Yeah.
I just like
Okay, chilling. But yeah, you guys thought everything went okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what I'll do is I'll shoot you guys over the link later today to download Ableton, and it'll have instructions in it on how to do it. Just follow the instructions step by step, and it should be pretty straightforward. And then until next week or whenever you have our next lesson, which we can also schedule now if you want, I would just tell you guys to, literally just do exactly what I did and play around with everything just to get comfortable within the DAW. Because you definitely want to be comfortable before trying to, create tracks. Because the worst thing that happens is you have these ideas and you need to be efficient in being able to put your ideas from your head into your DAW. And the easiest way for you to lose that, inspiration or whatever it is by you not knowing how to translate something from your head to your DAW. So the first week we really want to just try to be honing in on getting comfortable. Like, okay, if I want to record vocals, like I know how to do it easy. If I want to put in a synth patch, or like a synth like pad, I know how to draw the notes in easily. I know how to like put reverb on it easily, stuff like that. So we can do that. And of course, if you have any like questions here and there before our next lesson, feel free to reach out to me like via text or Instagram or whatever, and I can definitely answer those. But yeah, did you guys want to schedule your next lesson right now, or did you want to wait on that?
I think yeah. We're just gonna be in Catalina next. I think usually we'd want to do Mondays at the same time.
Yeah.
I feel like that if that works for you.
Yeah, you're gonna be in Catalina all next week.
No, just for Monday. So we could do it and Tuesday, I think. Could you do it Thursday next week? And then Mondays after that? Or what?
Yes. Yeah, I could do it Thursday. So my Thursday, I just have a dentist appointment from 9 to 10. What is your guys' schedules on Thursday look like?
I have school day Thursday and then a voice lesson.
Oh, okay. Friday.
Yeah, Friday would work.
This is just for next week.
Yeah, Friday.
Okay.
Okay.
Be like 12. After 12, I'm fine.
Okay. Or maybe would you want to do something closer like Wednesday? Unless you guys.
I guess I could do. I could do Wednesday at the same time next week.
Wednesday at 10:30.
Yeah. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that does work for me. Okay, I'll put it in my calendar right now, and I'll definitely shoot you guys, a text or something a day or two before, just reminding you, and we'll go from there. But yeah, I hope you guys learned a lot today, and I'm excited to keep helping you guys out with this shit.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, have a good day. I'll catch you guys soon.
You too.
Bye.
Peace.